Well, good afternoon, everyone. Can I start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we gather and pay my respects to elders past and present. To my ministers that are in attendance today, Minister Cameron Dick, Minister Kate Jones, Minister Sterling Hinchcliffe, Yvette Darth, our Attorney-General, Minister Bill Byrne and Minister Leanne Enoch, to all other state members of Parliament, to Senator Anthony Chisholm, to Milton Dick, the Federal Member for Oxley, to mayors and councillors that are in this room. Also, can I acknowledge our host, Professor Stephen Martin. It's wonderful to be here, and I think we'll also be seeing each other next week, but more to say about that in the near future. I also want to take this opportunity to acknowledge that today is National Police Remembrance Day as well. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us here for this very important occasion. Before I start, can I send my best wishes to the people of South Australia who have experienced significant weather event overnight, something not unusual for Queenslanders. I can confirm that Powerlink Queensland has contacted their South Australian counterparts and offered any assistance necessary. Queensland is uniquely placed to provide assistance given we owned that particular electricity business on behalf of the people of Queensland until late 2012. If Queensland can help South Australia restore power any quicker, we will. Well, thank you very much for having me here today. It's always a wonderful opportunity to discuss all the great things we are doing as a state, but also address some of the challenges that we face. I firmly believe our opportunities outweigh our challenges, and I think there's a mounting body of evidence that backs us up. I've said it before in almost every sector of the economy. If you could be anywhere, you'd be right here in Queensland. The tourism sector is booming. Mining has made a much heralded comeback in recent months. We've had recent rains that are replenishing the west, and fingers crossed there's a drought-breaking wet season ahead of us. And even though property prices in Sydney and Melbourne are climbing at a rapid rate, many investors are telling me the southern states are at a risk of overheating. And that means the potential for growth in Queensland is not going unnoticed. Even still, last week, REIQ reported the median house prices in Brisbane at a record $630,000. You saw at budget time that our growth estimate for this financial year was ahead of the rest of the nation at 4%. Recently, we saw the state final demand figures for the June quarter record strong growth, powered largely by public infrastructure investment, with the strongest quarterly growth since December 2009, which shows that our plan is working. When you combine this domestic growth with exports, we can all expect some positive economic momentum for Queensland. We also said our revenue estimates would be conservative, and that is proving to be the case. Coal prices are above Treasury estimates, which not only means more investment and a better future for the mining sector, but it potentially means extra revenue for our state coffers as well. We're also seeing strong evidence of a recovery in agricultural exports. Global sugar prices have reached a 4-year high, which is great news for Queensland given we produce 95% of Australia's raw sugar, the majority of which is exported. The value of cotton exports has increased by 54% over the year to July. Wheat exports are up 97%, chickpea exports up 30%, and the export of beans up 25%. And as I said earlier, our tourism sector is thriving. Operators are telling me, especially in the far north, it's the best tourism season they have seen in a decade. Last night, I had the opportunity with some of my Cabinet colleagues to have dinner with the board of Star Entertainment and the consortium, and their enthusiasm for the Queen's Wharf precinct and all of the opportunities for tourism across Queensland is simply overwhelming, and it's easy to see why. Data released by Tourism Research Australia recently showed 11% in international visitation growth over the 12 months to June, generating $5.1 billion in overnight expenditure. Brisbane and the Gold Coast had the largest international visitation numbers on record. There was also a huge increase in visitor expenditure of more than 20% in the Whitsundays and tropical North Queensland. In fact, when I've been up in far North Queensland, they've said, "Premier, don't send us any more international flights. We don't have the accommodation to put people in." So if there's any investors out there, think Cairns and far North Queensland. We're also seeing our cruise ship industry ramp up. For the first time, Queensland recorded more cruise ship visits than any other state in the nation, with passenger numbers up by 100,000 on the previous year. A record 329 cruise ships visited Queensland, according to the Australian Cruise Association's Economic Impact Assessment of the Cruise Industry in Australia report. We have done what we can help to help facilitate higher tourist numbers, especially through securing additional flights into Brisbane, Cairns and the Gold Coast that will bring 500,000 more visitors to Queensland and $350 million a year. We are attracting even more visitors by increasing funding for destination marketing, airline attraction and support for our tourism operators to connect with customers online. And in November, the Tourism Minister and I will be launching a brand new marketing campaign to lure even more tourists to Queensland, so watch this space. All this activity means the big investors are looking to us closely, with $12 billion worth of tourism-related infrastructure on the books, meaning more jobs for construction workers as well. And as I like to point out as often as possible, the NAB Monthly Business Survey Business Confidence Index, the indicator used by economists around the country, has Queensland leading mainland Australia. In fact, we've been on top since July last year, coinciding with the delivery of our first budget. Deloitte's recent infrastructure report tells a tale of its own, that Queensland has a pipeline of more than $180 billion worth of public and private infrastructure on the books. That's more than New South Wales and twice that of Victoria. And while unemployment rate seems a bit stubborn, jobs growth is evident. 41,500 since the last election. We also have a budget in surplus. We have lower debt levels in our two budgets, and we have methodically gone department by department, keeping a tight rein on expenditure while acknowledging previous cuts to frontline services and beginning this task of restoring them around our state. As we promised, we have returned the focus to the front line, with a record health budget of $15.4 billion and a record education budget of $12.9 billion, and a big congratulations to both Minister Cameron Dick and Minister Kate Jones. These are huge portfolios that they are making sure that the reforms are happening and that people across Queensland, no matter where they live, are getting the vital education and health services that they need. So what have we done? We have employed 1,940 extra nurses, 650 extra doctors, nearly 480 extra health professionals, 940 extra teachers and teacher aides, 300 extra police, 54 extra paramedics, 44 extra firefighters, and we have 166 more child safety workers than we had 2 years ago, and we'll employ another 47 by the end of the year. And I'd like to publicly acknowledge the work of all of my ministers for the work that they have been doing in their portfolios. It has often been amused me that much of the commentary over the last 18 months seemed to suggest that a new government's agenda should be implemented in the first 5 minutes and the results of that should be apparent immediately. Unfortunately, it's that kind of short-term thinking that has proved troublesome for previous governments. It's not a trap that my government was going to fall into. We knew that our agenda, one based on hard work, on diversification, on patience, and on putting people first, would take time to put into place. We've tackled some of the policy challenges that previous governments would not. We've legalised ride sharing. We've begun a much-needed review into trading hours, and we are actively chasing interstate businesses to relocate to Queensland through our Advanced Queensland Industry Attraction Fund. I firmly believe that we are now starting to see the benefits. Even the CCIQ acknowledged recently that there has been a turnaround in the economy. Friends, our policies have focused on the traditional sectors, but I think in many cases they are as strong now as they've ever been. But we've also focused heavily on diversification. And you must have been living under a rock if you haven't heard either myself or my Innovation Minister, Leanne Enoch, speak about my Advanced Queensland agenda. In my view, with diversity comes opportunity and long-term strength. We've also looked at new ways of doing things and better ways of doing other things. The Deputy Premier has put in place a state infrastructure plan giving long-term certainty and guidance for infrastructure investment across the state. And next week, the Deputy and I will unveil a new government initiative in Townsville aimed at unlocking some of the economic potentials of our cities and our regions. The Treasurer is leading our market-led proposals framework and our Business Development Fund, two initiatives the private sector has really embraced. My Energy and Biofuels Minister, along with the State Development Minister, are helping Queensland become the renewable energy powerhouse we should have always been. And our biofuels sector is really starting to ramp up, and that's evident through the biofuels partnership we have signed with the US Navy, the first of its kind with any state government in Australia. And a few weeks ago, we announced that 6 new solar farms would be built here in Queensland, creating a brand new large-scale commercial solar industry in Queensland. And we are putting in place the building blocks for Queensland's workforce for the future. Nothing is more important than ensuring our workers and our young people have the skills our economy needs now and the skills that they need into the future. It doesn't get much coverage, but we have rescued TAFE as we promised we would, and we have poured millions of dollars into skilling Queenslanders for work and other training and employment programs. And while I don't want to harp on it, we are working hard to attract more federal investment to Queensland. We know that when all levels of government work together, good things can and do happen. We've seen it with the Moreton Bay Rail Link, which will open next Monday, and I'll be there along with the Transport Minister. The Gold Coast Light Rail Stage 2, and we're about to see it in Townsville with the new stadium. We hope to see it more with national road projects like the M1 and, of course, the Cross River Rail. We're not asking for special treatment, although we'd happily take it. We just want a fair go, and surely that's not too much to ask. And yes, while we have worked tirelessly to implement our economic agenda, we have balanced that with a progressive policy platform that aims to bring Queensland into the 21st century. The reality is this: the Goss, Beattie and Bligh governments did a great job dragging Queensland out of the 1950s, but they didn't finish the job. I'm proud to say that my government and the outstanding work of my cabinet, and particularly Attorney General Yvette D'Arth, is already one of the most reforming governments in Queensland's history. The facts back that up. We have implemented a more transparent political donations process, and we will have real-time disclosures in place by early next year. We have begun the process of reforming statute of limitation laws for victims of institutional child sexual abuse. This is the right thing to do. We have reformed alcohol-fueled violence laws. We are delivering on our promise to remove 17-year-olds from adult prisons, something that's been put in the too hard basket for far too long. We campaigned for and we won a public referendum for 4-year fixed parliamentary terms. We have introduced the most comprehensive organised crime laws in the country, targeting all forms of serious organised crime, including those crimes including child sexual exploitation. We are tearing down gay panic defence laws. We have changed the age of consent, and we've introduced new laws and poured massive resources into reducing domestic and family violence in this state. Not bad for a minority government. Some of these reforms have been on government to-do lists for decades, but no one has got them done. We've either got them done or in the process of getting them done. And Queensland will be a better, fairer place for them. But despite the giant steps forward for our society and our economy, we know that there are many challenges. The economic growth enjoyed in some parts of the state isn't being experienced in others. In some sectors, traditional jobs have been lost. I've long acknowledged that, and our recent budget was designed to provide more job opportunities, especially in our regions, where they're really doing it tough. It was designed through statewide consultation. The consultation led to the $100 million Back to Work program. That, in just a really short period of time, has assisted 133 businesses employ more than 230 workers, and there's many more to come. That kind of positive consultation with my government will continue. In fact, next Tuesday, my cabinet will meet in Townsville. I will spend the entire week up there listening to local workers and businesses, hearing firsthand how government can help them and their families. Townsville and other regional areas are experiencing the transition I mentioned. We have seen significant turnover in the mining sector. We're witnessing the transition in the manufacturing sector. We've had one of the longest droughts in living memory, and construction is coming off a once-in-a-generation, if not once-in-a-century boom, thanks to the creation of the $60 billion LNG industry. These challenges have a ripple effect across the economy, impacting businesses, communities and families sitting around the kitchen table. This problem isn't unique to Australia, or indeed, it's evident in many parts of the rest of the world. Many nations have 2, even 3 or 4-speed economies. But what we are also seeing is economic instability, combined with what seems to be a constant flood of doom and gloom scenarios that are coming through our television screens on the nightly news. External factors like the threat of terrorism, the global refugee crisis, constant reports of conflict in the Middle East and instability in Eastern Europe. There's an unceasing torrent of confronting information that smothers positivity and cruels optimism. It's already manifested itself in several ways, both at home and abroad. Brexit is the classic example, as well as the rise of Donald Trump in the US. And here at home, with a record number of people lodging a vote with independents and minor parties, often with extreme right-wing views. We are living in what I like to term at times an era of discontent that is happening right around our world. It's a feeling in the community that is ripe to be taken advantage of by political opportunists, something we've seen happen overseas. And it's something from which Australia and Queensland is definitely not immune. It means that many people facing economic anxiety have those concerns exacerbated by other insecurities and uncertainties. And it can take little more than overly simplistic outrage to fuel those fears rather than finding a way forward. And you would have guessed by now I'm particularly talking about the re-emergence of One Nation. It's important to use the term re-emergence because we must remember One Nation has been around for almost 20 years. Election after election, they've run candidates and little has changed. Certainly their policies have not evolved. This is a group that says vaccination causes autism and cancer. They want to bring back high-powered guns. They think workers don't deserve unfair dismissal laws. And their website says One Nation opposes globalism. So if you're a Queenslander whose job relies on exporting to overseas markets, like workers in Queensland mines or on Queensland farms, then you should be very, very concerned. With those kinds of views, how can One Nation help you get a job, or how can they help you keep a job? They have zero answers when it comes to the big policy questions that our state and our nation are facing. But I know full well that there was a significant number of our community that used the federal election to protest the state of Australian politics. They disagree with the Prime Minister that this is the most exciting time to be an Australian. They don't think it's exciting to have to find their feet in our diverse transitioning economy. They are concerned about their families and they are concerned about their futures. I certainly don't think they endorse the conspiracy theories that we see on the news. I think their uncertainty is based purely and simply on economic anxiety. That anxiety revolves around keeping their job, or if they've lost their job, how do I find a new job to provide for my family? On that front, I certainly empathise with them, and I understand that our great challenge is to take people with us through times of change. But the One Nation Party, or anyone who decides to use the slogan "Make Australia Great Again," is not the answer. Having spoken to many senior diplomats and business people from the US, including Republicans, it's clear to me that many regret the fact that no one called out Donald Trump early enough to stop him. One Nation has $1.6 million in public funding alone, and now has a more sophisticated political operation than ever before. If we don't act now, and as a community, and say that the answer lies in hope and opportunity, not fear and loathing, who knows what the future might bring for us all. That's why I believe it's time for leaders to lead. We must stand up to political opportunism, especially of the extreme variety, and correct statements that are clearly wrong and designed purely to marginalise our fellow Queenslanders. For instance, there is only one set of laws for Queenslanders, no matter where you live, what your beliefs are, or what your background is. And we must say that we are going to do it, and importantly, how we intend to deliver on our policies. In recent times, the compact between politicians and voters has been broken because too many politicians have promised things at an election and broken those promises thereafter. That's certainly been the case here in Queensland, especially during the term of the Newman-Nichols government. I can stand here today and proudly say of our 553 election commitments, we have delivered 336. We have delivered on more of our election commitments in 18 months than the former government did in their first 26 months. I can assure you today that I will have a vastly different approach to the former government now into the next election. Where the LNP is falling in line with One Nation, I will lead by example. I will call out fear-driven politics when I see it, because it is not in Queensland's best interests. I won't do deals with One Nation because it is not in Queensland's best interests. And I will not allow our trade and investment and the thousands of jobs that go with it to be put at risk because it is not in Queensland's best interests. For me, this is something that should be above politics and preference deals. I will deliver on my election commitments to Queenslanders as I promised I would, because their well-being and their future is my number one concern. And I will build on those commitments as we did in our second budget with policies like our $40 billion infrastructure plan, our $100 million Back to Work initiative for regional Queensland to create more economic opportunities. An inclusive community means greater economic mobility, less economic inequality, more hope and opportunity for each and every one of us, no matter where we live. Friends, I promised Queenslanders I would lead a team that would rebuild our economy after 3 years of cuts without selling our major income-producing assets, and I have delivered that. As a state, we now have lower unemployment, higher growth both domestically and in exports, higher confidence, more frontline services, less division, and a fairer, more modern Queensland. Our prospects are strong and our future is indeed bright. Queensland is a state that thrives on positivity and is renowned for the optimism of our people. There is a unique Queensland spirit out there. It's embedded in each and every one of us. We actually make time and effort to give people a hand up when they're going through tough times. And that's exactly what we need to do now. We need to help those people out there that are struggling to find another job because of the transition our economy is going through. And we will not leave families behind. We will take them with us on this journey because there is nothing more important than ensuring that people have a job. There is dignity in work. And if you think about it, if you lost your job for a moment, what that would mean for your family, for your friends, you would be constantly worried and the anxiety would be almost all-consuming. So now is the time for us to stand together as one. It's the time to help our fellow Queenslanders, to take them through this transition that we're going through with our new economy, to take people with us. And I believe that when we work together as one, Queensland is indeed a better place for it. Thank you.